On a crisp autumn morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, Amara Johnson walked into the First National Bank on Trade Street. She was dressed in a tailored navy blazer, white blouse, and black slacks, her hair neatly pulled back into a low bun. At 38, Amara carried herself with quiet confidence, her steps purposeful as she approached the counter. She was there to complete a transaction she'd been planning for weeks, one that required precision and discretion. In her hand was a slim leather folder containing documents she'd carefully prepared. The bank was bustling with its usual mid-morning crowd. Retirees depositing pension checks, business owners handling payroll, and a few young professionals grabbing cash before heading to work. The tellers worked efficiently, their fingers tapping on keyboards, while the hum of low conversations filled the air. Amara joined the line, her eyes scanning the room briefly before settling on the teller ahead. She didn't notice the branch manager, Richard Hayes, watching her from his glass-walled office. Richard, a 52-year-old man with thinning gray hair and a penchant for order, had been managing the branch for over a decade. He prided himself on knowing his customers, their habits, and their accounts. To him, Amara stood out, not because of her attire or demeanor, but because she wasn't a regular. He squinted at her through his office window, noting the folder in her hand and the way she stood, calm but alert. Something about her felt off to him, though he couldn't quite place it. Perhaps it was the way she didn't fidget or check her phone like others in line. Or maybe it was the folder, which looked too formal for a routine bank visit. Richard's instincts, honed by years of dealing with fraud and suspicious activity, kicked in. He'd seen news reports about sophisticated scams targeting banks, and he wasn't about to let one happen on his watch. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for the bank's security hotline, which had a direct line to local law enforcement and, in certain cases, federal authorities. "This is Richard Hayes, branch manager at First National on Trade. I've got a situation here. There's a woman in the lobby, African-American, late 30s, carrying a folder. She's not a regular, and something's not right. Can you send someone to check it out?" The operator on the other end took the details and assured Richard that they'd escalate the call. Within minutes, Richard received a call back confirming that federal agents were on their way. He hung up, satisfied that he'd done his duty to protect the bank. He adjusted his tie, stepped out of his office, and positioned himself near the teller counter to keep an eye on Amara. Amara, unaware of the scrutiny, reached the front of the line and greeted the teller, a young woman named Sarah with a friendly smile. "Good morning," Amara said, sliding her folder across the counter. "I need to complete a wire transfer and access a safe deposit box." She opened the folder, revealing a set of documents, a government-issued ID, a notarized letter, and a series of forms with official letterhead. Sarah nodded, taking the documents and beginning to process the request. As Sarah typed, Richard approached, his expression tight. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, addressing Amara. "Can I ask what brings you here today?" His tone was polite, but edged with suspicion. Amara turned to him, her face calm but her eyes sharp. "I'm handling some personal business," she replied evenly. "Is there a problem?" Richard hesitated, his gaze flickering to the folder. "We just need to verify everything. Standard procedure." He glanced at Sarah, who looked confused but continued processing the documents. Amara nodded, unfazed. "Of course. I have all the necessary paperwork." The tension in the air was subtle but palpable. A few customers in line exchanged glances, sensing something unusual. Richard's presence at the counter wasn't typical, and his stiff posture suggested more than routine oversight. Amara, however, remained composed, answering Sarah's questions about the wire transfer with precision. The transaction involved a significant sum, one that required additional verification. But Amara's documents appeared to be in order. Unbeknownst to Amara, 2 FBI agents were already en route, dispatched after Richard's call was flagged as a potential security threat. The bank security hotline had relayed the details to the Charlotte field office, where agents were briefed on a suspicious individual at First National. The agents, a seasoned pair named Agent Michael Carter and Agent Loring Wynn, were instructed to assess the situation discreetly. At 10:37 a.m., the agents entered the bank. They were dressed in plain clothes, dark suits that blended into professional atmosphere. but their presence drew attention. Customers turned their heads, and the tellers paused briefly, sensing a shift in the room. Richard, spotting the agents, hurried over to meet them near the entrance. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said in a low voice. "She's at the counter now with the teller. I don't have specifics, but her behavior and the documents she's carrying seem unusual." Agent Carter, a tall man with a calm demeanor, nodded. "We'll handle it. Point her out." Richard gestured subtly toward Amara, who was still speaking with Sarah. Agent Gwynn, her sharp eyes scanning the room, took note of the folder on the counter and a calm exchange between Amara and the teller. The agents approached, their movements deliberate but non-threatening. "Excuse me, ma'am," Agent Carter said, addressing Amara. "We're with the FBI. May we have a word?" The room seemed to freeze. Sarah's hand stopped typing, and the customers in line leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. Amara turned to face the agents, her expression unreadable. "Of course," she said, stepping away from the counter. Richard hovered nearby, his arms crossed, watching intently. Agent Gwynn spoke next, her voice calm but firm. "We receive a report about some unusual activity. Can you confirm your identity and the purpose of your visit?" Amara reached into her folder and produced her ID, handing it to Agent Carter. "My name is Amara Johnson. I'm here to complete a wire transfer and access a safe deposit box. Everything is documented." She gestured to the folder, which Sarah was still holding. Agent Carter examined the ID, then passed it to Agent Gwynn, who pulled out a small device to scan it. The device beeped, and Gwen's eyes widened slightly as she read the screen. She exchanged a quick glance with Carter, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am," Carter said, his tone shifting from formal to respectful, "could you step over here for a moment?" He gestured toward a quieter corner of the lobby. Amara followed, her demeanor unchanged. The customers watched, some whispering, others openly staring. Richard trailed behind, his confidence waning as he noticed the agent's change in tone. In the corner, Agent Gwynn spoke in a low voice. "Ms. Johnson, we verified your identity. You're cleared, and we apologize for the interruption. But we need to confirm one more thing. Can you provide the authorization code for your transaction?" Amara nodded and recited a 12-digit code from memory. Gwynn entered it into her device, and the screen flashed green. She looked at Carter, then back at Amara, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "Everything checks out," she said. "You're good to proceed." What happened next stunned everyone in the bank. Agent Carter stepped back, straightened his posture, and offered Amara a crisp salute. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice loud enough for the room to hear, "thank you for your service. It's an honor." Agent Gwynn followed suit, her salute equally sharp. The lobby fell silent, the weight of the moment sinking in. Richard's jaw dropped, and Sarah froze, her hands hovering over the keyboard. The customers, unsure what they'd just witnessed, exchanged bewildered looks. Amara returned a slight nod, her expression still composed. "Thank you," she said simply, then turned back to the counter to complete her transaction. The agents stepped aside, their role concluded. But their salutes had shifted the entire atmosphere of the bank. Whispers spread like wildfire among the customers. Who was this woman? Why had FBI agents saluted her? As Amara finished her B, using this with Sarah, Richard approached cautiously, his earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. "Ms. Johnson," he stammered, "I'm terribly sorry for any misunderstanding. I had no idea." Amara cut him off with a raised hand. "It's fine," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You were doing your job. But next time, maybe ask a few questions before calling the cavalry." Richard nodded, his face flushed, and retreated to his office without another word. The truth, which only emerged later through hushed conversations and a few discreet inquiries, was that Amara Johnson was no ordinary bank customer. She was a highly decorated federal operative, working on sensitive assignments that required absolute discretion. The documents in her folder were part of a classified operation, and the wire transfer was tied to a government account used for covert activities. Her identity had been flagged in the FBI system, not as a threat, but as a high-priority asset. The agent's salutes were a rare public acknowledgment of her contributions, a gesture reserved for those whose work often went unseen. As Amara left the bank, the customers parted to let her pass, their eyes filled with curiosity and respect. She didn't look back, her focus already on her next task. Behind her, the bank buzzed with speculation, and Richard Hayes sat in his office, replaying the morning's events in his mind. He'd made a call based on instinct, but it had led to a moment he'd never forget, a moment that reminded everyone in the room that appearances could be deceiving and heroes could walk among them, unnoticed until the truth came to light. The incident became a quiet legend in Charlotte, shared among bank employees and customers alike. It was a story of snapped judgments, unexpected revelations, and the quiet strength of a woman who carried the weight of her service with grace. For Amara, it was just another day, another mission, another step in a life dedicated to protecting others, even when they didn't know it.